Hey guys, Isaiah here with Goo Gaming, and I have Logan here with me. And we're going to do a deck discussion over what we believe the best deck moving into the beginning of this new format is. It's going to be PK Brave. We're going to discuss how we think the deck's going to be built and some tech choices for the deck.
Yeah, for sure. I think this is more of like a stock list. I'll get into some explanations of things may have changed. You know, people have seen the PK decks that we were playing here in the TCG before the Brave cards came out, and I'll explain why some of those cards, if you notice, are not in this list, like such as the other level 3 extenders. So yeah, let's go ahead and get into the deck, I suppose. So the first card, as you can see, is 3 Torn Scales. This is the best PK monster in the deck. The Brave engine, if we talk about that, actually locks you out of using the normal your normal summon monsters effects. But what's cool about Torn Scales is you can link him away and then bring him back with his own effect from the graveyard after you banish a PK, and then use his effect then. So you don't actually have to use his effect when he normal summons. That's why it like synergizes so well with the deck, and they're all level 3. So and then you play the 2 cloak, the 1 gloves, and the 3 silent boots. This is all standard. This is, the same ratio we were playing before Brave came out. It's probably gonna be the same ratio before, or like after they come out as well. And then the Rhoda. Foolish is another card that people weren't really playing in the PK deck because it only got to your PK monsters before. But now, not only does it get to your PK monsters, it also gets to your Brave engine because Water Enchantress can be banished from your hand or your graveyard to search for your spell. Also, she's a level 3 extender if you control a Brave token, or a Venture token, I should say. So she also just synergizes with the deck being an extender to help you push through plays. So it's not only an Omni Negate like most people think. You can actually, if you just don't open like full combo, and you still open the Brave card, it's just 2 extenders to help you get into your Scythe lock. So you play 3 of the spell, 1 of the Faithful Adventure, the Griffin, and then the Equip spell. It would not surprise me if people decided to cut the Equip spell in certain builds of Brave, but I do like it in this deck, not only being a main deck Optimistic Mind, it also allows you to go second, as well as it is a free discard for Torn later in the combo when you do. Then you have the 2 Fusion Destiny, the Celestial and Dasher, and then the obviously Scythe for some reason did not get banned. Yeah, this engine's so crazy. It's crazy cards. So now I'm going to go into why I think it's just going second cards going into week 1. If you notice, I'm playing 3 Droplets, 3 Ash, and 3 Infinite Impermanence. I think week 1 you want your going second cards to be the most generic as possible. You don't really want to draw Nibiru against the Eldritch deck, and you don't want to draw, like, for example, Harpy's Feather Duster against the, I don't know, the Tri-Bird deck that's still being played or whatever, right? Like, you want to try to draw something that's good against every single matchup week 1, and I think this is important here. A lot of the hand traps, though, I do want to note, will just eat the Griffin negate, and so that's something to think about going later in the format if Scythe gets more popular. Then we have 2 Prosperities just to tie the deck together to help consistency, and then the 4 traps. I don't think you need wings. Wings just isn't good. So I'll do the side deck last because this isn't a real side deck, as you can see. It's actually just 15 different cards. I'll do that last. I'll go ahead and go to the extra deck now, and then we'll double back and come back to the side deck. So you have the Shore Phoenix, Enforcer, Sky Thunder, Zeus, Leviair, 2 Break Sword. It comes up. Access code, I think it's better than Boral Sword because it's just it's a main deck out to skill drain, which is important. But also it's just like it just allows you to just break boards, right? I think that's really cool. Apollo, I think this is the card you could cut if we're doing this profile post. What's the Battle of Chaos or Dimension of Chaos, whatever the Chaos set is. I don't even know the name of it. For the Dark Charmer. So the Dark Charmer will definitely be in this deck whenever that set comes out. So. Dagda, obviously. Cheerbeanie is really cool because Cheerbeanie can dump the level 3 Water Enchantress or your PK monster, so it just ties the whole deck together. Has a lot of synergy. IP, Unicorn, Link Spider, Anaconda, Almirage, and Rusty. I definitely think Almirage is still 100% needed. It's not going to change even after Brave. So yeah, our side deck is actually just 15 different cards. Basically, I was going to just talk about different side deck cards that people might want to play and explain how I feel about them going into this next format. I think we're next week we'll be coming out with a side deck card tier list of what we think is gonna be better and worse in the format. So we'll go ahead and get into it, and Isaiah can put his input on here since he knows more about it. So Artifact Lancia, what do you feel about Artifact Lancia, Isaiah? What do you think about this?
I think after the ban list, there's going to be a lot of decks. Like the consistency got hit of the Invoke deck, but I think the Invoke deck's going to be very powerful because it's a deck that you don't have to play the Brave Engine in, and it's pretty good against the Brave Engine. The Alistair Invoke Dogmatica decks, and I think this card is there's a lot of good cards against that deck, but I think this deck is really good when you activate it on response to an invocation. I think it's going to be really good against that. It's also really good against Tinnies. With the Protos being gone, I feel like they're going to focus more on Tinnies. Maybe, like, I don't know if they'll add any more, but, like, a lot of people may stop playing, like, Protos and just play more Tinnies. Not Protos. Phoenix Enforcer builds and just play more Tinnies. It's good against that. And it's going to be good against the mirror matches as well with this deck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I definitely like Lancia going into this upcoming format because it's a hand trap you can use before they get the Griffin on the board, right? And it still like interrupts them for the rest of the turn. So it's possible that we could actually see this card in the main decks. I think it's not out of the question, especially if this deck gets super popular. It's also okay against Eldritch randomly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. I think it's gonna be good against everything that's in the meta. At least it's like Ash. Ash is not the best hand trap, but it's decent against almost every deck in the game. And I think Lancia going forward in this format is probably going to be decent against every deck. Like, it at least does something.
Right, yeah. Yeah, I completely agree with all that. How do you feel about Droll and Logbird going into?
I'm real questionable on Droll. I'm not sure if it's good against the Brave Engine. I haven't played it against Brave yet. I've always been real questionable on Droll. I think everyone's playing it in the current format or the past format, and I feel like it's just more of a dead card most of the time. If it does resolve, usually it does something like against the Invoke deck, it's pretty good if they don't open everything they need, but I feel like against a lot of decks, this card just doesn't do enough.
Yeah, I think going into this new format, Droll definitely gets worse. Drytron's obviously weaker. The bird deck's definitely not nearly as strong. So I definitely could see this card not being in everyone's side deck like it was last format. Excuse me. But yeah. But again, it's Droll and Lockbird. You know, it doesn't take a lot for this card to be good in the format. But I think currently it's not as good. So
I agree.
That. But one cool thing it is, when they do the Brave, token thing or the adventure thing, it automatically makes them, like, that's usually the first thing they do to play around hand traps, and if you draw them there, they just can't search for the rest of the turn. So in certain decks that may be super powerful, like you're playing against Dragon Link and stuff, that's super strong. So
yep.
That's also something to keep in mind. So Nibiru, what do you think about Nibiru? It's pretty popular right now, right?
I think Niburu is currently in everybody's deck, but I also think that the Brave Engine kind of like just stops this card. So in decks like PK where you don't really care much about hand traps because you can play through so many, adding the Adventurer, Brave Engine, whatever you want to call it, with that, it just kind of makes you not scared of anything at all. Because you can play through Ash, Imperm, and everything else, and your problem was Nibiru most of the time if they had multiple hand traps, but with the Brave Engine, you don't really care. Like, you can still play through your regular hand traps and then negate the Nibiru.
Yeah, I agree, but I do think Nibiru is really strong. And the main reason is because they don't always get to keep the Omni Negate on board. And I think in situations where they do not keep the Omni Negate on board, which I almost put in the main deck of this deck, but I wanted to have more generic cards for week 1 to explain that to you guys. I think that if they do use the Braves as extenders, which will happen more times than people would think, I would believe, that Nibiru is super strong in those scenarios because the Brave Engine automatically gives them 2 sub and dry. You can nib them super early.
That's fair.
Token Collector. What do you think of Token Collector?
I think it's going to be the best side card in the meta. It's just, I think your big decks are going to be PK and Sword Soul's obviously going to be here, and Token Collector just shuts off Sword Soul most of the time, and it's really good against the Brave Engine. So like, it should be in everybody's side deck, I think, unless you're playing decks like Sword Soul.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to agree. I think, especially people who are playing Aurora on deck, should definitely be terrified of this card because this card just literally kills their deck. It's a one card like they lose almost, especially if they're playing Brave, which a lot of people will be. Like if you've seen our tier list video where we speak really highly on the Tinyi Auroradon Brave deck, and this card is literally like a single handedly like just kills that deck. It's like equivalent of like Lancia against PK, but like better, right? It's
Yep.
pretty much the same thing. Lightning Storm. I love Lightning Storm. What do you think about this card?
I like the card. I think this is a card, in my opinion, should only be played against back row decks unless you're like a deck that can kill somebody in one turn. Because if you open it and you're able to like stop them or kill them or clear their board with it and get set up, it's fine. But if you don't open it and you draw it later, then you're just top decking a dead card most of the time.
Yeah, I do like it in PK specifically because
Yes.
I know this is a PK profile. The reason I really like it in PK is because you usually lose to Lancia. Unlike a card we'll talk about in a minute, which is evenly matched, loses to Lancia. Lightning Storm doesn't. So it allows you to Lightning Storm the back row and then be able to put up some kind of board where that's DPE or whatever, right?
Yep.
Which I think is really strong.
Yeah, I do
Same
think
thing with
this should
Twin.
be in the side deck of every PK deck.
I think Twins, everything, Twin and this card is almost the same card, right? It just
Yep.
depends on like what you're expecting. Lightning Storm's a little more flexible, where you can like kill the monsters, if you need to. But I feel like most people summon their stuff in defense, so that doesn't come up that often. So
Right.
this is a different card.
I do back to the Twin Twister thing. I do think Twin Twister is just better overall in this deck over Cosmic because, like you said, everyone's playing Lancia for this deck, and also like it gives you cards in the graveyard, like your Phantom Knight cards, to use your effects.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think it being chainable is also super powerful.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people will probably decide to play Antispell.
Yep.
Fragrance, which isn't on this list, but it's a card that people side deck all the time. So, another card, which is Super Polymerization. I'll go into this really quick. Why I think this card's actually pretty decent. So it's this card is a one card stop to the scythe play, because if you play one of the guys that takes, you can either play like the Predaplant that takes like a fusion and a dark, or you can play the regular one they usually use, Starving Venom, that just takes 2 darks, and you can just fuse Rusty and DPE, or Rusty and DPE for both times, and then it completely stops them from scything you just in one card. And I think that is something to think about, because if they do their combo, they have no way to get Rusty on board unless they pop it with their DPE, and it just gives you, it basically stops the Scythe lock indefinitely, and all you have to do is play through Fog Blades or a Brave Engine if they have that on board. So, and you already have a big body on board, so it's really easy to have the Brave Engine, right? It almost outs the entire board by itself.
Do you think this card is good
PK
against
mirror.
any other deck other than PK Mirrors?
That's weird. I think it depends on how the format develops. If there's a lot of dark decks, which I'm not sure what other dark decks there would be, probably not.
Yeah, I think it'll be more of just like a mirror side card.
Yeah, or just decks that just, because like, spoiler, if your opponent, like, if your opponent does the full combo, you actually have to have 2 droplets or droplet imperm or whatever. And if they have the Brave negate with that, you also have to have a way to stop, like, if you have imperm, you have to that doesn't work, right?
Yep.
Or if you have droplet discard trap, that also works, because they can't chain the Fog Blade and chain their guy's effect. But yeah, I definitely think this is a one card stop for that combo, and I think it's definitely something. But there is a lot of fusion targets, right? You have Muddy Mud Dragon. If your opponent's playing like, there's an array of different cards. Your opponent could have, like, they evoke deck, right? They have DPE plus Mechaba. You could Super Poly that too. So there's like so many different options with Super Poly. Evenly matched. We kind of talked about it in the side deck of this deck. I don't think it's very good. Mainly because, like, Lancia, right? Like, you just do not want to get Lancia on your evenly matched. Not only can you not use any of your PK effects, but also you're just locked out of just negate your evenly match, right?
Yep.
So, Feather Duster. Everyone should probably be playing Feather Duster with Eldritch, right?
Yep.
Cards are crazy.
Feather Drain's gonna hurt, but Feather Duster says no.
Yeah, right. So Red Reboot. The reason I put this on here, and I know this is a lot of back row removal, but Red Reboot's a little different. Red Reboot's one of those cards you can actually draw with like Imperm or whatever to stop the PK deck from still scything you. Because you can just Red Reboot their trap and they can't chain their second pop, right? This makes sense.
Yeah. I just think Red Reboot's a good card. I'm glad it's a 1, but I kind of miss it at 3. But
yeah, it'd be nice against the Eldritch decks to have a Red Reboot.
It's such a powerful card, but if you draw it against Eldritch, like destroying other back row is really good, but like if you open Red Reboot with combo against an Eldritch deck, it's just like it's hard to lose.
Yeah, definitely. Red Reboot's insane, especially if you can like draw it in conjunction with like another backer removal, like Lightning Storm or whatever. Twin. Like, you activate Twin. They try to let's say they do have Solemn. They try to Solemn you, Red Reboot them. It's game every time. Regeki. How do you feel about Regeki?
Regeki's at 3 now, so I feel like there's definitely gonna be people playing this. I don't think it's awful, but I just feel like at the point in any deck you want to play this card, I feel like if you can get Lightning Storms, you would rather just play Lightning Storm.
Yeah, I could see that. Some decks I could definitely see it being pretty good against is decks like Sword Soul, right?
Yeah.
If you can bait out the one Baron, you could Regeki and get rid of the other two interruptions, and it's just free game, right? But it doesn't stop Scythe.
Yep.
And I think that's a huge thing. And if you're planning on trying to win a tournament, you probably shouldn't be playing Regeki in your deck. So
I agree.
My opinion on that. Gamma. I do not think this deck can play Gamma reliably, but in the main deck, but I could definitely see them side decking it because they can take out some of the bricks for the other bricks and just use it as a going second card. What do you think about Gamma?
I think Gamma is very powerful, but in the PK deck, you have to take out 4 cards just for this engine. And I feel like anytime you're siding going second against PK, taking 4 cards out is a lot just for a 1-card side card. And I feel like at that point you could side 2 of 2 other cards, or 3 of 1 card and another card. Like if you're going against like a deck that Red Reboots against, you can side in 3 back row hates plus a Red Reboot. And you might not even side Gamma against those decks, but I just feel like it's too much to commit in a side deck in this deck.
One thing I do like about Gamma and DD Crow and those type of cards that interact with the graveyard is if you can bait out the negate with the Griffin and they do scythe you, you can just Gamma the affecting grave or DD Crow the scythe or whatever, right?
Yep. And
it plays around their entire board and you just have to deal with the Fog Blades, which I think is pretty cool. This card also hits DPE in the graveyard and keep it from coming back, which is cool. Yeah, I think Gamma is really good though. Dimensional Barrier.
I like this card.
What do you think?
I think it's more or less like, how do I say this? It's very good against decks it's good against, but it's not a card that's like a blowout because if you open it going second, you can't use, or not going second, but if you open it turn 3, it's gonna be dead. But if you're playing against Sword Soul and they don't have Protoss anymore, so if you open this card against them, it's probably gonna stop their turn. And against other decks, I don't see a point in playing this against Invoke decks like a lot of people are doing because it's a fusion card, especially in PK. I feel like your turn 1 just does enough.
Yeah, and I think that's something I was going to talk about. If you notice, in all of these 15 cards, right, this is the only card that is for going first.
Yep.
All of these cards are going second, and that's the reason I did this on purpose. The reason I do not think you should side deck cards for going first in the PK deck is because I feel like if your combo resolves, you should just win the game. A really high percentage of the time. So most of your games you're going to lose is games you go second. right? That just makes sense
Yep.
if you're a combo deck. Therefore, you shouldn't worry about going first, game 2 and 3 as much in your side deck. You should try to make sure you can win as many going second games as possible in different matchups. So
Yep.
that's why I think people who side like Antispell and stuff like that and PK, they're like, oh, it stops Dark Roll No More or whatever. Dark Roll No More doesn't do anything to this deck, which is the next card. But also, you just don't need it. It's not needed in your deck. You're making your deck worse because you're going to be drawing cards like this instead of drawing like combo cards.
Yep.
That's also important.
It makes your going first worse, and it's not good going second at all. Not only is it a trap card, but if they already have the board established, it doesn't do anything.
Yeah, and this goes for all cards that are like this: Anti-Spell, Solemn Judgment, whatever. Like I see a lot of people playing like Solemn Judgment in their PK decks. They're like, oh, it stops Droplet. Okay, but if you're full combo, you can play through 2 of those anyways. And if they have 2, they only have like 2 cards. You're telling me they can play through 2 Fog Blades with 2 cards? Probably not. So I definitely think people just need to rework the way they build their side decks when it comes to decks like this.
Yep. Dark
Roll No More. What do you think about this card?
I think it's very strong in the game, but it's not very good against the mirror. It's not very good against PK. I think it's. I like this card against Sword Soul. And if you like in PK, you're going against Sword Soul and you play this going second, and then you can just like rebuild your board like you were going first with your Cyclock and everything. Then you kind of just shut them out of the game.
Yeah, I definitely like this card, but I do not like this card in the mirror. But this card is super good across the board, though. I think like the roar, like if you do this against Sword Soul, the only thing you have to do is play through a blackout.
Yep.
And if you open any of the pieces for the Brave engine, you can just out of blackout super easy or negate it when they activate it.
Yep.
So that's not a big issue. As well as it's just good against like if you play against Flunder, right, you can just negate their entire board, and then if that deck doesn't have barrier statue, they just lose, right?
Yep.
So yeah, I think this card's super strong. And I definitely think it's gonna be more popular. As long as the format doesn't develop into everyone playing Scythe. That's one note I will have on it. This card's very bad against any deck that's trying to Scythe you, because usually they're doing the standby phase. So
if they're smart.
Yes. Last card, Ghost Ogre. But this can also go into other hand traps like Ghost Mourner, like these other weird niche hand traps that people just don't really play right. I think Ghost Ogre's cool. It hits the journey.
Ghost Ogre, I hate this card as like people will play it. Like I don't think it's good anymore as it was before, but it's very good against the Brave engine, like you were saying. I love this card. It's like my favorite art of a card ever. Like one of my favorite cards in the game. But I just feel like it's not good against a lot of things until the Brave engine came out. I feel like it's okay against that, but I don't know if I would play it just because it's good against the Brave. Like the Brave engine's annoying, but like most of the time it's gonna be dead in your hand if they're not playing the Brave deck. Or not playing the Brave deck, like they don't open the Brave cards.
Yeah, I can agree. I think the card's super cool against the Brave engine, and it's okay against PK. It's not the worst, to be honest. But the problem is, against a lot of the other decks of the format, this card literally does nothing. Like, if you play against Eldritch, what are you Ghost Ogring? If you play against Virtual World, you're not Ghost Ogring anything either, really. If you play against, what's another deck that we can think of? The Bird deck is not that great. Prankits does nothing. So yeah, it's just a lot of the time this card works as like a really, really bad gamma.
Yep.
This is what it is, right? Like if you're siding that, like you probably could just be playing gamma and it would just be way, way better. But this card does hit spells and traps, so it is something to keep in mind that it can hit. It can hit the Faithful card or the Journey, whatever this card's name is in English. So yeah, I definitely think this card's cool, but I definitely think it's overhyped, I would say.
I agree with you. Is there any other side cards we're missing that we think might be played in this deck?
No, I don't want to talk about in the PK side deck, because this is a lot of the cards that people would just side in their PK deck, right?
Probably.
The only card that like people wouldn't side deck is probably like Regeki or like Super Poly, but I think Super Poly is something cool that people could play in the format for the mirror match that would give them an edge.
I can agree with you. Alright guys, that's our PK deck profile, how we think it's going to start in the meta. We will be uploading a tier list for side deck cards, not just for PK, but for everything in the meta. So we're going to try to go over any card that we think might be in the side decks this format. If you have any cards you want us to look at, let us know. But we appreciate you guys taking your time to watch the video, and peace.
See you.